Hey, what's up you guys? It's the Curious Owl here and I have another book review for you guys. So I told you guys in my last book review that I was going to be reading Paper Towns by John Green. In the last book review I reviewed his book Looking for Alaska, which you guys can go check that out up there. This book honestly is very similar to Looking for Alaska in the sense of a central theme that they have. The central theme is actually something that a friend of mine, Becca, over at Bookworm Becca, which I will leave her link down in the description for you guys to check her out. She mentioned that there's this theme that he tends to use in his novels where it's you cannot put people on pedestals because you will watch them fall and it will disappoint you, which I think is very true. John Green, I feel like, is a very realistic writer. He doesn't sugarcoat anything in his novels, which is something I really like because I feel like many realistic fiction novels anymore today, they sugarcoat things so much, or they make things so candy sweet and happily ever after, where it's really not always that case. For instance, there's some novels where like the guy's trying to find the girl and he ends up finding her, she falls in love with him, and it's always kind of leaves a bit of a bad taste in my mouth because it doesn't seem realistic to me. In some senses it does work, but I don't feel like the majority of realistic novels anymore really hit that realistic note, which I think John Green does amazingly. If you guys have not read Paper Towns or have seen the movie that has come out in the last couple of years of Paper Towns, this novel is basically surrounding around this character Quentin Jacobson trying to find Margo Spiegelman. To give some background on the story, Margo and Quentin have been friends since they were 9 years old. He essentially fell in love with her at this point, and they've been just friends for a while. They kind of separated when they got into like middle school age because they just found different friend groups and everything, but they were next door neighbors. They've been next door neighbors for several years, so he still sees her every now and then. Well, pretty much like a couple of nights before Margo goes missing, she climbs into Quentin's bedroom and is like, hey, let's go on an adventure, essentially. And Quentin's like, I can't do that. Like, he's not really into all of that. But Margo really opens him up and gets him to understand that she's a little different than how she used to be. She's really kind of changed, and there's a lot about her that he doesn't know that he wants to get to know. But once he wants to get to know it, she goes missing. And many people in town know that she's been notorious for running away and then coming back within the week or so. So Quentin thinks she's just gonna all of a sudden magically reappear in a few days. That does not happen. She goes missing for several weeks. There's no trace of her. There's no clue as to where she is. And Quentin gets nervous. He doesn't know if he's ever going to see her again, and he has essentially this fantasy that if he finds her, she's going to fall in love with him and everything. And he thinks that she's so perfect and so wonderful, and she needs to be saved, like this damsel in distress kind of thing. So he enlists his friends, Ben, Radar, and Lacey, who is Margo's best friend, and they try to find the clues to find out where Margo is. To try to find out where she's gone, where she's heading, and what she's doing. This book honestly hits the hardest with the whole theme of not putting people on pedestals. In today's society, I feel like we put too many people on too high of pedestals because we want people to meet our expectations. I feel like too much today we will think of someone as like a goddess or a god. For instance, a boyfriend or girlfriend you might have, you might say that they're the most gorgeous thing on the face of the earth, or they're the most handsomest, they're the most intelligent, they're just perfect in every single way, and there's not a thing that they can do wrong. And more often than not, we realize but don't accept that those expectations are not met, which is where this theme comes in. You cannot put people too high on a pedestal because they're not always going to meet all of your expectations. You can't set standards for somebody just because you think that they can meet them, because they're not always going to. They're not always going to be able to meet those high expectations that you want, and it's just going to leave you heartbroken and disappointed and God knows what else. This novel really stresses that because it is true. We don't realize that today because we're so concerned with just this high expectation kind of prophecy almost, that everyone just has to be perfect. Everyone has to be this mannequin, cookie cutter kind of thing. And that's not true. It's really not. We don't understand the different things that people go through. We don't understand the things that they've experienced. And it's because we don't understand those things that we don't understand those things, we can't understand why they don't meet our expectations. And I feel like this novel, honestly, is the best way to express that to people, that we're being stupid. We can't do this to people. We can't tell them that we want them to do something that they can't possibly do and then get angry about it or get upset about it, because it's just, it wasn't supposed to happen anyway, essentially. Overall, though, this novel really is well-rounded because it has such a great message behind it, and the characters are so funny, and there's a lot of comic relief that kind of lightens the mood. But then there's other people, like there's other times where these same characters are also very philosophical in a sense, and they bring a lot of insight and a lot of perspective into the story. For instance, there's a character, Ben, who is Quentin's best friend. He's a hilarious character. He's very much a stupid kind of witty person. You know how you have like the people that are really funny witty, like they just come up with stuff on the like on the drop of a hat, and it's just really funny. Then there's witty people where they're like really smart when it comes to what like comebacks and stuff. Then there's just stupid witty, which is what Ben is, where essentially they just say something completely stupid that makes no sense, but it's hilarious anyway. And it just kind of like works with what they're talking about. Ben is definitely one of those characters. He kind of just is, he's very much the comic relief of the story because he just has all these crazy antics throughout the entire novel with different people. And he's also, I think, one of the most down-to-earth out of all of the characters because he isn't grounded in the fact that of these high expectations thing. He's more of a person where he's like, you know, people aren't going to meet your standards, and that's okay. Whereas I feel like many of the other characters, especially Quentin, are kind of like, you know, I was hoping that they would be like this, but it doesn't turn out to be that way. Ben is much more of the grounded kind of person in this novel, as well as being the comic relief, which is an interesting combination because you wouldn't expect the comic relief person to be this grounded person either. You would just expect their head to be in the clouds all of the time, and that's not the case, which I think is really interesting for John Green to make a character that's like, that's like that. Then there's just Quentin, and then Margo, who is just this enigma of a person. You really don't know anything about her. John Green does not really go into much about her until towards the end of the novel. You find out a lot more about who she is and what she's kind of grown to be. She's still an enigma, though. She is this complete enigma that nobody can understand, and she is that person that people will put on a pedestal because she's the most popular girl in school. She cannot do anything wrong. And then when she does something wrong or something happens to her, everything falls apart. Honestly, this theme really hits home because I have put many people on a pedestal in the past, and I've been disappointed. And it's something I've come to learn in the last few years, and I honestly knew this like ahead of time, but the fact that John Green actually makes this point is very nice because other people need to know this. And I could go on and on about this whole topic, but I really don't want to bore you guys with anything. So essentially, my review of this is it's a great message, great characters, very funny characters, and very down to earth also, and just a very realistic story. It's not something that it's not a romantic fiction at all. It's not this whole kind of like sugar and rainbows and happily ever after kind of thing. It's very much a grounded story. And so that's essentially my book review for this book, Paper Towns. I hope you guys enjoyed it. The next book I will be reviewing is actually going to not be a John Green book. This was, I think, one of the only few I had on my iPad, but I will be getting to John Green in the future again. The next book I will be reading, though, is a James Patterson novel, which is actually something I've wanted to read ever since it came out, but I never was able to get my hands on it. It is Confessions of a Teenage Murder Suspect, I think is the whole name of the title. I'm pretty sure. But yeah, it's basically the first book in the Confession series by James Patterson. I know that one of my good friends back in high school read it, and she absolutely loved it. She's a giant James Patterson lover, which I am as well. So I'm very excited to see how this goes. I've heard so many good reviews on it, and I cannot wait to get started, because if I know that if I like it, I'm going to want to read more of it, which, as we all know, it's going to take me a while. But thank you guys so much for joining me, and if you guys like this video, please do give it a big thumbs up and hit that button down below and subscribe to become an owlet in our flock, and I will see all of you guys in my next video. Bye guys!